Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of Tuesday Takes with Tre'Shon Diaz. We're back here on the Dirty Birds of Brews podcast presented by FanDuel. It's been a couple weeks, Tre'Shon. I was out, then you were out, but we're back. We're still here. You know, I know everyone was panicking like, whoa, we just have to listen to Kevin talk on Tuesday by himself now? No, we're not doing that. We got Tre'Shon Diaz back in the building. He's at Trey3Sean. I'm, of course, Kevin Knight of Falcoholic. Kevin going to be bringing you guys free agency review. We also had some free agency news dropped on us right before the show, so that's always nice to get to. But before we do, Tre'Shon, how we doing on this fine Tuesday?
Yeah, no, doing good. Happy to be back. You know, we've got a lot to talk about. Ian's been busy. And you know, Kevin, right now it's a good time to be busy because no fan base is ever happier with their GM than during his very first year or the year he wins the Super Bowl. So, you know, Ian's just got to keep stacking players right now, and I think that's what we're going to continue to see.
Yeah. So, you know, I think it was a lot of smaller moves and some medium-sized ones that I think are good, but it's definitely a switch in approach for
Yeah.
this team. Obviously a new GM at the helm. We've seen the first trade down technically, even though, you know, it was before the draft, but so yeah, I'm excited to get into it. Lots of interesting stuff, but we could start with the news because we did have some news dropped just before the show where the Falcons signed two more veterans today. We'll talk about the one that's probably more interesting and impactful first, and that would be running back Brian Robinson Jr., who was most recently with the 49ers, to come in and ostensibly be the running back two here in Atlanta. We haven't heard any contract details or anything like that yet, but the obvious thing is probably that Brian Robinson is coming in to be the Tyler Algier sort of fill-in and probably at a lower price tag. But this was one that I think several people had mentioned as a possibility. There seemed to be some mutual interest, and now it appears, at least from initial reporting, that Robinson will be heading to Atlanta to really just mess with your fantasy team more than anything. I saw a lot of fantasy people freaking out like, oh great, can't wait for the 15B Robinson trade offers I'm about to get. That's going to cause a lot of chaos, but definitely an interesting player and definitely an established running back to add to the room that was just not there before.
Yes, for the fantasy sickos out there, it's going to be very important to focus on the junior. You're gonna want to look for that JR at the back of that name. I think that we're going to probably see all the fantasy companies really emphasize that this year because it seems that community is a little bit of turmoil right now over the B Robs being all sequestered here in Atlanta. But I like the signing. A lot of people were pushing. I think for a power back like this, somebody who can kind of replicate what Algier was doing, because we know Bijan's a true, he does everything. He can run through you, run by you, run past you, run over you. And so, a real complementary back to that skill set in my mind is either a third down gadgety running back that can do a little bit more in the pass game, or you have a traditional kind of power back third down guy. I think Robinson really fills in that role. As the market was kind of developing, I was a little nervous that Najee Harris was going to be a legitimate option, and not trying to knock Najee too much here, but if I'm going to pick an former Alabama back, I think B Rob is definitely where I would much rather be right now. The no Achilles injury is kind of huge. I've kind of had my fill of Achilles injuries at this point.
Yeah.
Especially coming out of free agency. So, I think this is a move that makes a lot of sense. Dollars are going to be really interesting here because I wouldn't expect the pay to be that different than Algier, but I think the reason that it would be is that Robinson kind of had his opportunity to lead a room when he was with the Commanders, whereas Algier is really getting the opportunity to prove that he can do it in, Arizona. And so I think the perception here is probably what affected the dollars at the end of the day, because I don't have any reason to believe that Ian would pay the same or more for somebody who's going to do the same job that Algier would have done if he had stayed. I think the dollars are going to work out nicely. At this point, I'm just curious to see if Ian's going to sign. Is it a 2-year deal or is it a 1-year deal? Because so far, Ian's inked 12 one-year deals. So, it seems like that's really the calling card of this offseason. So it'd be interesting to see, longevity wise, what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I think this is a good fit for Robinson because, this is a spot where he doesn't have to come in and take on tons of carries. And, I think it's a better fit for the Falcons because, again, it felt like we were sort of caging like a beautiful bird and Tyler Algier and just kind of not letting him fly. And I hope that he will get an opportunity to fly in Arizona. And I think that he absolutely will. We know James Conner there can't stay healthy. As much as I do like James Conner, he's also getting up there. And, I suspect the Cardinals will have every reason to hand the reins to Tyler Algier. And I'm not just saying that as a Tyler Algier dynasty owner, speaking of fantasy, but, I'm hoping he gets his opportunity. I think that would be really exciting for him. And then, for the Falcons with Brian Robinson, it's a logical fit. He slots in nicely to a similar role here. Do I think he's as good as Tyler Algier? No, but we're talking about a backup running back here. Bijan's going to be playing the vast majority of snaps. We know this. And, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Falcons to invest a ton, but getting a guy like Brian Robinson is a legitimate guy that can carry the load for you for a few weeks if Bijan ever had to miss time. And they just didn't have that on the roster. And I really didn't believe that they were going to invest the draft capital in someone to get that guy in the draft. And while I still think we're very likely to see a running back in the draft, probably late or at least several UDFA pickups, this kind of gives them the guy there behind Bijan and the closer type that they just didn't really have, and I think that it's a good signing. I think it's a good fit. And again, it takes one more thing off the board where it's like if they didn't have a guy like this going into the draft, it's like, okay, well, we're just going to have to get an early day 3 running back now to make sure there's someone behind Bijan or what are we doing here? And
yeah.
You add these type of signings to the roster, and again, there's another one that we're going to talk about right after this, that you're just kind of taking needs off the board to now you can be a lot more flexible in the NFL draft, which is, of course, going to be the next topic of discussion after we sort of wrap up free agency this week. But I like the signing a lot. I'm assuming the money is not going to be crazy, and this is a guy that we've seen in a good situation. He can be very productive, and I think, this is a good situation for him too. He knows if he were to get an opportunity to start here, even temporarily, he could have some very good games behind this offensive line. And this is a very running back friendly offense. So, excited about the signing. I think it's a good one. And I think it'll be one that's beneficial for both him and the Falcons this season. Next one, probably not one that's going to be a huge impact signing, but Trevor Siemian returns to the Falcons here. And, we're going to get QB3 Trevor Siemian this training camp, but he's a veteran, does have starting experience. He is definitely, I would say a high end, QB3, low end sort of primary backup quarterback, but definitely a guy that gives the Falcons, a reasonable floor. And in terms of third quarterbacks that you need to go into a game, one of the more trustworthy options in that category. So another spot where the Falcons, don't necessarily need to go to the draft looking to fill out this quarterback room.
Yeah. And, it's not the prettiest addition. Obviously, I was surprised to hear that Trevor Siemian is still in the league, but it's QB3, right? It's kind of like you said. When I saw that come through, after hearing all of Tua's quotes, to me, I'm like, yeah, this is the mentor in the room, because Tua's made it very clear thus far he's not here to mentor anybody. He's talked about competing in every little speech blurb that comes out and everything like that. So Tua's here to take the job for himself, and good luck to him, I guess. And you don't really ever expect veterans to kind of be in this mentor role. A lot of people talked about it's going to be so good for Penix to have Kirk. Kirk's going to teach him this. And it's no, Penix is going to have to just copy Kirk's notes and learn by osmosis just through absorbing what Kirk is doing. Kirk is not going to be spending his time actually giving information to Mike. But Trevor's going to do that. Trevor's going to be this veteran in the room. He's going to help keep, I think, both Tua and Penix kind of in track. That's usually what you see from these older veteran QB3s. And that's something we haven't had. We had, the legend Stick last year here, not really the veteran per se presence that is going to be doing a lot of teaching. Maybe more of a don't do what I do kind of style of dad teaching there. And so, I think that, again, Ian's like we've talked about, really just focusing on let's clean up all these needs as much as we can. Let's do it as cost effectively as we can. And then we'll hit this draft, like you're saying, have that flexibility, kind of being able to, take each round as it comes and not really being super focused or worried about like, okay, well, we still don't have that running back 2-piece, or we like, well, let's throw a dart at some QB so we can have somebody else standing back there as well. It's Ian has been very straightforward since he's been hired, and thus far he's kind of been a man of his word. He's been accumulating those picks. He's really focused on kind of taking care of the needs of this football team, and so we'll see how that translates once the draft is here.
Yeah, and I think you're basically on it with that analysis. I think he's here to be an experienced quarterback. He has had to start games. He's had to come in. He can provide some of that veteran leadership here because, like you said, Tua is here to fight for a job. Like, Tua knows, like, this is probably one of his only opportunities left to continue to be an NFL starter. He needs to earn it and prove it this year if he wants to get another contract. And otherwise, he's going to be sort of relegated to that high-end backup status that he's kind of at now. And, I don't know how friendly that relationship will be between Penix and Tua. We'll see. But, I do think ultimately, that Tua pushing Penix and actually having a chance to unseat him, it's good for both players. Like, I think Penix is going to benefit from the competition, and so will Tua. And hopefully by the time week 1 comes around, we're confident in whoever the starter is. But it's one of those things where you can't necessarily expect your competition to be giving you all the answers to the test either. And I think the Falcons are wise to get some more veteran help in here just to make sure that everyone's getting the assistance that they need in the quarterback room. But 2 new signings, but we don't necessarily need to rehash every signing of free agency. A lot of smaller signings, a lot of depth signings. Quite a few guys that I think will be challenging for starting roles, but I'll kind of open the floor to you. Is there anyone in particular you want to discuss? We could kind of go down a list if you have any guys. I know lots of receivers. We got a lot of edge rushers. We got some defensive tackles. We got tight end reunion. So we got a lot of places we could go here.
Yeah, we do. And we're gonna go straight to the specialist, Kevin. We're pushing past.
I knew all those. That's why I didn't say it. 'Cause I knew. People.
Yeah. So Ian, I apparently need to work on my pitch game. Ian heard the Bradley Pinion pitch and said, "Thanks, Tre'Shon. We got it. We got it from here." And so, Nick Folk, I think, is an interesting one. You are playing with fire when you hire a 40-year-old in the NFL. Those hamstring injuries, those muscle ligament injuries are a lot more likely to happen. And so, I am not, Nick Folk performed great last year. He was the most accurate kicker in the league. The volume wasn't extremely high, but he showed that he could still get the job done. I'm a little worried that, if we, hit November, we're on an away game, we're out somewhere, maybe it's a little bit cold. He's gotten adjusted to being in that dome life. He's been living in Atlanta. Maybe there's a little tweak and a pull, and who knows what could happen there. 2 years, interesting, but was really hoping that we would at least see Gonzalez carried into camp, and maybe had a little bit of a competition there. I don't dislike this move. I just don't know if the risk is really going to be worth it here. I think it's going to be fine for the first half of the season. Not really worried. But, I believe the Bills experienced this issue last year. And they ended up having to call out their old guy to come back. And so, you do just get a little worried when you're hiring somebody that's, 40 years old. And with Bailey, that one feels more like a familiarity kind of hire. Yeah. We have their special teams coach from the Dolphins. He brings in Bailey. That's his guy. I don't think Bailey's a better punter than Bradley Pinion. I think that they're pretty equal. I think that they both have, maybe different qualities in terms of kind of what makes them really good, but they're really hard to separate. So I think that's just kind of comes down to, coaching preference. I think Bailey can definitely get the job done, and I think he can step right in where Pinion was. But, the whole entire special teams room has kind of really been remade here now. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of see what will the Falcons unit look like next year, because it's going to be completely different across the board. And, we're going to have, I think, even very few of the special teams players that were on here last year playing. The legend Felipe Franks is gone now. So, we're going to have to fill that role. We're going to have to fill Kadero Hodge. We're going to have to kind of see, a lot of different, moves. And I think a lot of these one-year signings that we've seen made, I think the trade down to acquire Sidney Brown, that's somebody that's had at least 200 special team snaps that they've gotten to the league. He had like 320 plus last year. And so you can kind of see, that there's a concerted effort to really ensure that the floor of that unit is nowhere near as low as it was last year. We're trying to get veterans in the building who have experience under the new rules who are going to be doing this. Whereas last year, we had a lot of guys, and this was the case across the league for a lot of people, where everybody's trying to learn everything all at once now and adjust to these new rules. We'll see, how that approach goes. But, outside of the specialists, I think, I think Deshaun Hand was a move that I wasn't really expecting that I think has a lot of upside for the team. And I think that's one to me that I think that might be Ian's best low-key signing in terms of all those one-year deals to have to pick through. I think that's one that we could hear his name a lot next year.
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned Nick Folk. I wonder if that was something that Matt Ryan pushed for, given how much success he had with a kicker that like really pushed his envelope like into the 40s. Probably could have continued kicking. Eventually I think the teams just got spooked by the age, but I do wonder if that's something that Ryan's like, look, last year we just couldn't count on our kicker. Eventually Zane came in and stabilized things, but Zane's career has been inconsistent. Last year was definitely his best stretch with the Falcons, but the Falcons I think have seen, maybe Ryan remembers the Giorgio Tavecchio years and half a season is not necessarily indicative of a kicker's overall quality. So, I wonder if that's part of it with Nick Folk, that Ryan wanted a reliable veteran in there, and Folk certainly has been that. Like if you're basing it off of his last 2 seasons, he's been the most accurate kicker in the NFL. So, still got the distance. He's not kicking 60+ yard field goals, but what did he hit? He hit some long one against the Falcons.
58er,
yeah,
57, something like that.
Yep. So clearly got the distance for most reasonable field goals. Like you said with Jake Bailey, it seems kind of like a push there. I wonder if Pinion's contract ask was like just a little too high for what the Falcons wanted, or maybe they wanted the familiarity, who knows, but Pinion hasn't signed anywhere. So I do wonder because I'm sure he'll have interest. So I wonder if his contract ask is just a little too much for these teams. But ultimately I think, hopefully the kicking game will be more reliable. And we'll see what the new special teams coordinator can do, but certainly it was not good enough last year. But, you mentioned a lot of the special team signings. We got multiple linebackers in to help with special teams. Sidney Brown, someone that, I really like Sidney Brown as like a defensive player, as like someone I think that can absolutely be a safety option for you. But he's been like one of the Eagles' most snaps on special teams probably for the Eagles the last 3 seasons. So he can help you no matter what. And I think he also upgrades the depth at free safety, which like they didn't really have anyone behind Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts. They have DeMarco Helms, but he's more of a box guy. There wasn't really anyone else there. They had Jordan Fuller, but he kind of got quietly removed from the roster. So I'm guessing that was not working out like they had hoped. And Brown is definitely someone that is at least reliable, nowhere near the impact playmaking that you're going to get from Bates or Watts in that regard, but certainly a reliable safety. Had to play quite a bit last season and was, pretty much an average starter, I would say, for the Eagles. So someone that I like there. But yeah, you mentioned Deshaun Hand, and that's kind of a good segue into the defensive line, which overall got the most investment in terms of players like signed in free agency, 3 edge rushers, 4 interior guys, including, one who was brought back with Elijah Garcia. But a lot of investment in that defensive line room, not a lot of high dollar investment, but a lot of 1-year deals. And, I don't know. I look at this room and like, a lot of people are like, oh, well, this room got worse. It's like, well, your star pass rusher got arrested. So yeah, it got worse. Like, I don't know what the hell you want the new regime to do about that. That there's not a whole lot you could do there. And I think honestly, like, I know a lot of people wanted them to go out and spend big money to get another edge rusher in here, but I think until you know what's going on with James Pierce Jr., is he going to plea out? Is he going to spend years in jail, or is he going to get a slap on the wrist and be back next season? I'm guessing they don't want to invest a huge contract in an edge rusher if Pierce could be back next year. Who knows? Not weighing in on the legal arguments because that's above my pay grade, but they probably are like, let's let this play out. We don't know how this is going to go. So, some smaller signings. Yeah, smaller signings instead. But yeah, I mean, let's start with Deshaun Ham because I agree with you. I think he's someone that honestly plays sort of a similar role to Ruka Rororo in that you move him up and down the line. He can play wherever. He's just a more veteran and experienced version of what Rook brings, and not as good of an athlete, obviously. He doesn't have the ceiling that Rook does, but I think he is someone that I find really interesting, and I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, and I think you bringing up Rook is also very interesting here because this is somebody that I like initially. I'm like, oh, this is like he has the potential to eat into Rook Ororo's snaps quite a bit here based on the kind of usage and versatility. So just kind of looking at his, if you look at his like PFF snap distribution, it kind of tells the full story. He's got at least let's see here. We're looking, not a ton on the interior at nose and stuff like that, which is maybe kind of where they could see, him and Rook being able to be on the field at the same time a little bit more. We've seen Rook in the nose tackle position. We don't like it, but we've kind of seen at this point that the team feels like it's kind of a necessity, and we're hoping to continue to see him grow there. But when you look at how many times Hand plays as the 3-tech, plays as that 4-eye, and everything like that, it works into the philosophy of Nate Ali's defensive line, which is versatility, right? We've seen Dorless lined up between the 3 and the 5. We've seen Zach Harrison lined up between the 1 and the 5. They play Zach. We've seen Zach in the wide 9. And so, Nate Ali, Jeff Ulbrich, there's a clear focus on, guys that can do more for you than just be stuck in one role. And so I think that Hand really does fill that for them. I think he's somebody that's going to be able to contribute immediately. And when you look across the board at all the signings, he got one of the bigger 1-year deals. I think his is like the second or third most amount in terms of value. And so, that kind of to me speaks like, okay, this is somebody that they truly kind of focusing on playing and relying on this year. We saw Street exit. We retained LaCale London, and then so Hand kind of feels like he's going to fit right in there, kind of fill in the DO role, fill in the Street role. Because, Anyamata was really the only other guy that I think was kind of really playing beside Rook in that similar setting.
Yeah. I think it's a good addition, and it's one that, if Rook is still struggling with inconsistency, Hand may be coming in more, especially on early downs to help, solidify that inconsistency. I think, that's one of the things I think we see is that throughout, other than maybe the Chris Williams signing, like, they were looking for guys that are going to raise the floor of this run defense, which was the biggest issue by far, last year. They were just so inconsistent against the run. And, a nose tackle is still a need. I don't know if they actually want one because they didn't sign one again this year. They didn't draft one last year when they had opportunities to do so. I'm not sure if they're going to add one. Like, I honestly don't know. Now, we know they've been sniffing around nose tackles in terms of like guys they're visiting with and have shown interest in. DeMonte Capehart is one. I think Chris McClellan from Missouri was another one that so they're sniffing around them. I don't know if that means they're actually interested or if they're just doing that to mess up my mock draft. I don't know. I'm kidding. I know they don't care about my mock draft, but it is interesting because I think Elijah Garcia is another guy that was more of a run defender. And then you look at the edge rusher additions, and I think every single edge rusher they added is sort of like an upgrade in run defense over their counterpart. Like, to me, I think Samson Ebukam they view as like a Leonard Floyd replacement, who's probably a better run defender. Probably, I mean, maybe could be as good of a pass rusher. Come, 2 years removed from that Achilles, he had 9.5 sacks the year before that. So I love Ebukam. I think that's my favorite signing of these guys. But I think Azeez Ojulari is your sort of Ebukam replacement, which is funny because they swapped places, like more or less. But I think he's a guy that you're like, yeah, this is our pass rush specialist. We're not really, but I think Ojulari is a better run defender than Ebukam was. So, and then Cam Thomas,
that's a wash. Honestly.
I think so too. Yeah, and the Eagles paid a lot more for Arnold Ebukam. Shout out to the Eagles for that comp pick. Thanks, guys. And then Cam Thomas, much more of that base package, early down guy that gives you a little pass rush, but they had Khalid Kareem, but they kind of refused to ever play him. So maybe with Cam Thomas, they actually will use him on early downs for more of that base package stuff. And I think he's, probably an upgrade there as well. So, I know people were wanting major moves at edge with James Pierce Jr. maybe not in the picture, but I feel like they upgraded all of their depth spots. So yes, we're losing James Pierce Jr. Not much we can do about that. Yeah. But otherwise, I like the floor of that edge room a lot more than we had last year.
And you can want to upgrade the edge room, but when you look at like what the market was this year, who was that guy? I don't
30
really
something for Jalen Phillips. I mean, Jesus Christ!
Which is, that's a lot of money for pressures. I didn't really see the option out there. Unfortunately, there's obviously something. Mike Crosby's knee is cooked. Ian was never going to trade away the assets that were needed to get him in the first place. Trey Hendrickson, without our inside connect of Terry Fontenot being here, obviously that move was never going to go through now. So do you finally pay Trey the contract of 30? I think he's at 30 million plus, right?
Yeah.
Do you pay him that contract at 32 now? I was totally fine making the argument for that contract last year and the year before that when the Bengals kept teasing everybody that, they wouldn't be able to bring him at this point. But now I'm like, that's Matt Judon age when Judon came to the Falcons. Is that, really the kind of money you want to hand out? Or you feel good that he's going to be able to keep playing at that rate for 3 years? And so, every year we obviously want to sign all the best players in free agency and everything like that. This wasn't really a strong class for the edge group. I think the team, honestly, getting Azeez at that price, I understand that he didn't necessarily have the year the Eagles were hoping for, but this is somebody that still has I believe more career sacks than Arnold Ebukam. And like you said, I think he plays the run a little bit better. And so, this is somebody that makes a lot of sense to me. Samson, obviously, I know he's had injury issues, but he was with Nate Ali when Ali was making a name for himself when he was a part of the Colts defensive line. So this is somebody that's going to bring you that familiarity, that veteran leadership, kind of like you talked about, stepping in, replacing Leonard Floyd. And they paid $10 million for Leonard Floyd last year. They're paying a fraction of the cost for Samson this year. Obviously, we hope Samson's able to get that same production, especially from a pressure standpoint. But, as of right now, I definitely agree that the floor of this unit, I think, has definitely gone up a bit because, when we talk about that group going into last year, no one was super high on really any of those signings either. And it was a lot of you're hoping, Jalen Walker is this and James Pierce Jr. is that. And so, just because it doesn't seem like the prettiest picture right now, we have to play the games. And I think that this defensive line, coaching staff and defensive staff in general has kind of earned the benefit of the doubt going into this year and should get a chance to be able to replicate what they did with this new group.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the big thing here is we haven't had a staff that I think earned our trust with developing pass rushers and forever. So now that we might actually have one, I'm fine with the approach of let's bring in, some guys and let's coach them up because that's the whole point. If you can retain Nate Ollie and Jeff Ulbrich, these guys are pass rush. Finally we have guys that are we're going to coach up pass rush from these guys. You looked at the talent the Falcons had last year and while it definitely seemed like it was better in practice than on paper. Like, I still don't think this is like anywhere close to like the number 2 most talented pass rush from the NFL. Like in terms of sack production. So the Falcons are going to be able to coach up some sacks, and that is going to help them. Is it going to be as good as last year? Almost certainly not. Especially if James Pierce Jr. is not playing. But I think they did a very cost-effective way of trying to keep the floor and of this defense in the same category. And maybe we don't see this defense take the step forward I think a lot of people would like this year. But if they can tread water and kind of stay where they are with a more consistent offense, then this team could still be in that 8 to 9 win mix, which I think is what they're aiming for. Like, realistically speaking, this team isn't out there saying we're going to go win 12 games or something. They're trying to be competitive for a weak NFC South. And I think that's what they've accomplished so far. Real quick, let me get you guys a word from our friends over at FanDuel. As you know, March Madness in full swing. My UCF Knights did not pull through, so never take my advice betting basketball because I know nothing about it. But lots of games coming up. I know we had some upsets, and we still got. I can't help but pull for the low seeds, guys. It's just in my nature. We got Texas going up against Purdue, which Texas is getting 6.5 points. Purdue heavy favorites here, but I don't know. I'm feeling this one. So if you like my feelings, you could go with Texas here, or maybe you trust Purdue to close the gap here at -6.5, and make short work of 11 seed Texas. But exciting March Madness so far. So definitely keep tuning into that, and it's only going to get better as we close in on the final games over the next week or two here. But thanks again to FanDuel for sponsoring the show today. Thanks a lot, guys. And before we move on, I did want to touch on the linebackers, because this is one where they lost Caden Ellis, obviously, which is a major loss. And they bring in Channing Tindall, who I think is, again, one of those special teams guys you mentioned. But Christian Harris comes in, and I think a lot of people just were like, oh, that's another special teams addition. But I wonder if they actually think, Nate Ollie is familiar with Christian Harris from his time there. Obviously didn't coach him directly because he was the defensive line coach. But Christian Harris is definitely a Jeff Ulbrich linebacker. And I do wonder how important and impactful that signing might end up being, especially if they aren't able to get, a linebacker high in the draft. So what do you think about sort of the additions at that spot?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Christian Harris is the more intriguing of the two linebacker additions. It's nothing against Tindall, but he's been relatively a disappointment considering where he was drafted. Former third round guy, wasn't able to even get a snap on the field as a defensive player, last season. And so not somebody I'm putting a ton of stock in. I know the Georgia fans love it, but it's never a good sign when you're like adding a 3-year veteran and the first highlights that come up are their college highlights. You kind of want to see what they've done recently, and he has not done a lot. Yeah, special teams, which is great. But
he's fast as hell.
We didn't see any of those highlights hit the Twitter or anything like that, Kevin. So at this point, I'm with you. I think Harris, has the potential to kind of be, maybe not Divine Diablo, but like an enhanced Ronnie Harrison type signing. This is somebody that I think could be, a legitimate rotational linebacker. We could see him utilized in a lot of, nickel situations and things like that when the team wants to get a little bit lighter out there, and really kind of help, upgrade just that level of athleticism in that room, which Tindall does as well. I think I think the signing of Harris kind of already put a little bit of cloud over the one linebacker that's still under contract here from last year. And then Tindall was the dagger in the Bertrand scenario, because I just don't see how he's going to beat him out in any scenario here, especially when it comes to special teams. It's just two different levels of athleticism. And right now you need as many high caliber athletes on special teams as you could possibly have. And kind of like you said, Harris, this staff really seems to be focused on familiarity. Everybody's, last year we saw a couple of players, come in that had a little bit of a background, but with this entire, overhaul from the front office all the way down to the head coach, We're really seeing them kind of indulge in their former players, and I think that's a good thing. I think when you're going through a year right now that you mentioned, it's somewhat of a transition year, right? We're really focused on, how are we able to, rebuild this foundation while remaining competitive. And kind of everything on top of those 8 or 9 wins is gravy, right? Like, we're not playing or trying to, tank or anything like that. We're trying to be as competitive as possible. And I think a move like Harris kind of signals that, because you could have easily just brought back Ronnie Harrison. And we liked Harrison a lot. But these two signings, especially Harris, these are moves to upgrade that room. These are moves that I think that, you do lose Caden Ellis. Caden Ellis's best attributes wasn't necessarily being a traditional linebacker. And, we've kind of already heard rumblings coming out from Ulbrich that there's a real, there's going to be a real effort here to use Jalen Walker's versatility. And I don't think that means we're dropping Jalen Walker. I think that means we're going to see Jalen Walker lined up more across the line. We're going to get to see him get a lot more opportunities that Caden Ellis had. And so, I think adding a Harris also helps take some of that pressure off Walker, puts him in some of those similar situations. And it's going to be a by committee approach, which is what we saw last year. Everyone's going to get the opportunity to create pressures. Ronnie Harrison had 2 sacks as a linebacker coming in, playing, I think, about half the season, maybe a little more than that. But you can get production out of those linebacker spots through the different blitz packages and sim packages that Ulbrich runs. And I think Harris and Tyndall both have the opportunity to really use their athleticism to kind of, help out this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I do wonder if, obviously, I think one of Jeff Ulbrich's strengths is using what he was given. He didn't really put his stamp on the defense last year. He just kind of worked with what was here, and he got great results out of it. What he wants is 2 linebackers. He wants fast linebackers. He wants light, fast, rangy linebackers. And that may open up some other things, and we may see more pressure coming from other alignments. So, if he can trust, he knew he could trust Divine Diablo in coverage, and Caden Ellis, that man gave his heart and soul in coverage. I've never seen a 245-pound linebacker in man coverage downfield run like Caden Ellis did. That effort was exceptional, but not necessarily the best results doing that all the time. Christian Harris and Divine Diablo give you a lot more range. They give you a lot more ability to play zone coverage in the middle of the field. With 2 guys that are more specialized for that, and taking and asking more in coverage of your linebackers might free up your slot players to do more blitzing. It might free up a safety to blitz more. So I think it's, like you said, it's going to be a shift where we're not blitzing one of the linebackers all the time anymore. It may be more of now we're going to spread the blitzes out through the rest of the defense, because we can now trust our linebackers in coverage a bit more, and we're going to lean more on our front, our interior rush, as opposed to blitzing through the A gaps. Or maybe we're, relying more on a nose tackle in run defense, and we can have these lighter linebackers that can go make tackles sideline to sideline, that sort of thing. So it'll probably be more of a schematic shift than just a sort of production one. But that's how Ulbrich has typically operated, so it doesn't surprise me. It's also cheaper. Caden Ellis got 10 plus, so good for him. Shout out to Caden Ellis. But the Falcons were clearly not willing to go there. And for a 30-plus-year-old linebacker, I get it. And again, we'll see in the draft, do they double down on light linebackers? Do they go for a bigger linebacker? Do they get a nose tackle? We're going to get more of the pieces of the puzzle as time goes on. But it'll be fascinating to watch, because I think this is definitely an approach where they're going to have to cobble it together a little bit more, lean more on blitzing from various spots, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think we've covered the defense pretty well. In the cornerback room, was mostly just guys coming back, like C.J. Henderson and Natrone Brooks, so nothing too serious there. But on the offensive side, I know there was a trio of interesting pass catchers that got added. Probably start with Jahan Dotson, who seems like this is the guy that they view as someone who is going to be an instant impact player to lift sort of the floor of this receiver room, kind of continuing that trend. So what do you think about the signing of Dotson, which he was a guy that I'd kind of circled beforehand as if they're looking for more of a mid-range receiver, Dotson could be a good choice.
Yeah. Dotson is somebody that I liked a lot, especially when he was with the Commanders. And I know that he didn't have, the best, I guess, rookie season coming in with them. I do think that it was a little rash to kind of ship him out, immediately. But that's, Cliff Kingsbury for you. Not everything he does makes sense. The Eagles, I think, clearly saw the value. And, I think that had to do a little bit more with the quarterback. It just didn't really seem like Jalen Hurts is like one of the weirdest players to evaluate in this league. It's just hard kind of watching that passing game sometimes. And I know, there's a fair argument that a lot of that is coaching. I think they've been, going through offensive coordinators like crazy. Seems to be the biggest issue over there. But Dotson, I think that he has a legitimate opportunity to kind of be, fringe wide receiver 2, at the very least, a very solid wide receiver 3 here. He's somebody that I think is going to be able to be, play in the slot, play outside. I think he's got a lot of versatility, and he's going to be able to stretch the field a bit. He's not necessarily a burner, but I think he does have, legitimate field stretch ability. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, how he is integrated into this offense. Kevin Stefanski, Tommy Rees, with the signing today, like B-Rob, it seems that okay, there's definitely going to be this commitment to the run that we've all seen in Cleveland, and that it seems like we've heard that is going to be coming over here. And then so I think Dotson kind of comes in and almost plays that Jerry Jeudy role in this offense. I think we see, Drake London is going to kind of continue to thrive as like this power slot monster that he's really become over the last few years. And I think that those two can complement each other really well when you throw Kyle Pitts into that equation. And you can do a lot of different fun things with that group. I will say that the floor of Dotson is obviously a little bit worried. This is a guy where I'm like, John Dotson could come in and have 700 yards receiving and 6-7 touchdowns, or he could have 200 yards and 1 touchdown. It just kind of seems like volatility has been an issue for him over his career. But when you're a player that's bounced around a lot, when you're a player that's kind of, you had that first round pedigree and everything like that, sometimes it takes time to get your footing and recover after you've had a misstep, especially when the first team that took you kind of just, gives up on you rather quickly. And so he seemed like a real professional last year with the Eagles. Seemed like he's kind of took a big step as a pro. And I think that this is a really good opportunity for him to kind of showcase that he is that guy that was worth that pick. I know Steve Smith is really high on him, which, we can all point to an analyst that's high on a guy. It doesn't necessarily mean a lot, but, it is helpful that this move seems to have kind of been, received well around the league. It's like, okay, that makes sense. That seems like a really good opportunity for both parties.
Yeah, I like it. I think Dotson's, probably their sharpest route runner now. That was always what I liked most about him coming out, was that he was just really polished. Doesn't necessarily have the athleticism. I was a little surprised he went as high as he did in the draft, but this is a guy I think that is absolutely a professional wide receiver. You just look at what they had last year with Darnell Mooney hurt, just Jahan Dotson would have helped them so much last year.
Yeah.
Just someone competent, and David Sills was not even tendered or brought back at all. The Falcons probably brought back the best guy, which was Chris Blair, who just couldn't get on the field somehow. I don't understand what Chris Blair did to that last coaching staff. I feel like that man just showed up every preseason, outplayed everybody, and then just promptly got sent back to the practice squad. But, just Dotson, I think, gives them a serviceable wide receiver 2. And I think he hit as a wide receiver 3. I think he can be a legitimately good wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Probably going to have to play wide receiver 2 this year. But, he could be a serviceable wide receiver 2 and give them better production, certainly, than Darnell Mooney gave them last year. Not going to be as good as 2024 Darnell Mooney, but, he has that upside in him. That would be pretty impressive if he managed to reach those heights. But
I don't know if we're going to throw it that much. Either.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of the other point of that equation.
Mm-hmm. And the other guy, we got Lamade back in the building, Lamade Zaccheaus, who, again, I think this is a guy that showed he can be a wide receiver 3. He's kind of that wide receiver 3-4 guy. But again, just a competent NFL wide receiver that can start in a pinch. They just didn't have this guy last year. Like, I feel like Zacchaeus is probably better than everyone not named Darnell Mooney and Drake London on the roster last year. I think Dotson and Zacchaeus are both upgrades over everyone on the depth chart, and maybe even upgrade over injured Darnell Mooney. I don't know. So,
yeah, I'm a little lower on Zacchaeus. I like the return upside. So like this is somebody that's handled return duties, and like that's kind of like something that we've been worried about because the return game has been pretty lackluster the past couple of years. I feel like most people forget that Jamal Agnew was like cut in December. Like it's just kind of one of those things that the team has not figured that position out for a while now. Nate Carter couldn't field a kick. Would have been really cool if he could have, because we all saw the speed. He
looked exciting.
Preseason. Yeah. He looked really exciting. There was a lot of potential there, but I really like what he brings as a returner. I'm a little apprehensive about the receiving. Like I think I agree with your statement 100%. Better than everything that we had last year. There's no pushback on that. I think I have him as like a wide receiver 4 kind of for sure. I don't know if he'll be able to reach the wide receiver 3 threshold just because he's posted a double-digit drop rate the past 2 years. And so, I do get a little bit worried with volume increasing. Are we going to see the drops also increase with it? But that being said, like drop rate usually translates to about 5 or so drops throughout the whole season. Now, those could be brutal, like the Kadero Hodge not seeing the football in the Buccaneers game kind of drop. Or it can be, a bubble screen on first down. And so, it's hard to really quantify and really you have to contextualize all those drops and really see when they happen. But I definitely agree with you that this is somebody who you've upgraded the room with this signing. You've got a legitimate veteran who was not out of the league the year before and wasn't a UDFA option that you were too scared to play as well. And so, this is Ian. Outside of like the trenches, the only position group where I've heard Ian really kind of like talk about how he values highly is wide receivers. And so that does, I'm very curious to see now, because I'm like, you could draft a Skylar Bell in round 3 or 4. You could get, a Zachariah Branch a little later too. I feel like this group is kind of still waiting for one more injection to kind of clean out the whole thing. The Bears invested a lot in wide receivers. We saw Odunze, Burden. They did just trade away. The Bills just signed. Can't think of the name. From Carolina.
I'm gonna be upset. I can't. It's on the tip of my tongue. But yes,
but they made a huge trade to acquire him in the first place. This very valuable player that Kevin and we know. This is for you guys.
Incredible player. Yeah.
Comment now if you know the name of his receiver. It's trivia, but yeah. So I'm definitely anticipating a couple of more additions to this wide receiver room to kind of continue to fill it out. But so far, definitely like what we've seen. My biggest fear was like running this back with like even just 2 of the receivers that we had on this team last year.
Outside
of Drake London, of course.
Outside of Drake, he's fine. We can have that. They still have got work to do here. And, you do wonder if this is like one of those things where they kind of keep an eye on, post-draft, what's out there, depending on what they're able to get. I know a lot of people have mentioned like Tyreek Hill's out there. They're not going to rush out and sign Tyreek Hill. But, if Tyreek Hill remains unsigned after the draft, maybe he's like, I want to play. He seems to like Tua. Like, I know a lot of guys like, I don't like Tua. Tyreek Hill seems to actually like Tua. Maybe he wants to come play with Tua. I don't know. And like, do I believe like heavily in that move? No, but like, if you could get him on an actually reasonable deal, then like, sure, why not? Maybe he's got one more. I got one more in me. Maybe. But it's probably going to be a post-draft thing where they don't have to worry about comp picks or anything like that. But I could also see them draft multiple guys and just go that route. And maybe it's one guy on day 2 and one guy on day 3, or maybe they take a couple day 3 dart throws or whatever it is they're going to do. But maybe it's more of a receiving tight end. It's a good tight end class too. As
Loveland did really well for them last year.
yep,
Kyle Pitts could be in a single year franchise tag situation.
yep, and we'll see what happens with, I don't think David Njoku's signed anywhere yet either, right? So
No, he's not.
again, if he's out there post draft, like, all right, like get David Njoku in here and let's they're gonna run 2 tight end sets as their base, probably, and probably a decent amount of 13 too. So there's room, there's room in the van for David Njoku to come in here too. But like you said, like the receiver room is not good. It's definitely like bottom half of the NFL, but the passing volume needs to be taken into account where like Jahan Dotson might be the wide receiver 2 on paper, but he's probably like the 4th target, So if you think about it like that, it's not as big of a deal. It is more of a big deal if Drake London is to miss time, and then it's like, oh crap, now
Yes.
like now we have no one to play wide receiver. But at least they do have Jahan Dotson and Zacchaeus as people that are at least like functional NFL wide receivers. So
100%.
there is that to help. But yeah, speaking of pass catchers, another reunion. Austin Hooper back in the building.
Yeah.
And again, speaking about this team probably just featuring more tight ends in the passing game. Austin Hooper, solid blocker, still a solid receiver, good tight end 2 type of guy. Gets the reunion back in Atlanta. Matt Ryan was like, get me Hooper back. I need my guy back in here. But yeah, it's exciting to have Hooper back in the building. I know he was a fan favorite for a long time.
Yeah, it'll be cool to hear the hoop chants return to the stadium. Those were always fun. And Austin Hooper's kind of got that whole like late stage Jason Witten thing going on where like he moves so slow that the defense is thrown off and he just like magically gets open. Like but he moves at a different speed on the field than everybody else, Kevin. And sometimes it's hard to account for. He's the changeup out there. And so I think, you kind of already leaned into it with the amount of 12 and 13 personnel that we're expecting. This is a big upgrade as your secondary blocking tight end. Now, if you're still going to roll into next season with Charlie Warner, this is a fun blocking tight end duo that plays off of Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts obviously able to be out there with either of them and be on the backside of those plays. Pitts has shown that there's, every once in a while he can be on the front side of those design runs. But this kind of gives you the flexibility to be like, okay, we can throw Warner out there or we can throw Hooper out there. We don't have to worry about kind of tipping anything too much one way or the other because those guys are interchangeable. I think that's something that's going to be really key and important for this offense next year. And it is something that I think has always been a part of Stefanski's philosophy as an offensive coach. Everybody's always talked about how, I think before here, one of the bigger complaints from Browns fans is that, Stefanski's kind of bland. He has an offense where, kind of anyone can run it. But if you're able to do that at a high level, that is that's a really good quality to actually have, that kind of stability to be able to not have to worry about volatility. Like when we look at like the Falcons' one of the biggest issues under Z-Rob, it was volatility. Like you had no idea if they were even going to be able to get set some drives. If they were like, if you got worried anytime somebody got subbed in because you didn't know, now is there going to be a false start, a procedural error, is there going to be something like that? Z-Rob trying to do anything outside of what he felt was comfortable out of his one alignment became an issue. Whereas Stefanski's like, I'm going to throw 12 at you. I'm going to throw 13 at you. I'm going to, get under center and I'm just going to see if you can stop it. And we've got, 20 guys on offense that we feel comfortable changing in and out, being able to run this playbook all at the same high level. And so I think, it's really a signing like Hooper to me kind of signals that, there's definitely going to be a focus on clean offensive play, being able to do as much as you can out of those personnel groupings that he likes so much.
Yeah. And like you said, I think the upgrade to their 13 personnel will make that package just a lot more impactful. I think, taking Catoriano just didn't really give enough oomph, I think, to justify the 3 tight ends. And They didn't lean on it. They really could have like used that package because again, the wide receiver depth was awful. Like just as few wide receivers as possible, not named Drake London, would have been better for that team, and they just didn't really have the option to do that. And I think it hurt the offense as a whole, and it would be quite nice to be able to lean on that 13 more. We've seen more and more offenses leaning into heavy personnel. And again, with the run game the way it is, with the offensive line hopefully back healthy, with the Caleb McGarry out there at right tackle again, we could really see this be a run-heavy attack with a lot of tight ends on the field, using a lot of misdirection, using a lot of, tight end passes to supplement the run game, and not really overly relying on a receiving core that's just not that potent right now. And in a way, it also kind of limits your exposure on the quarterback side. If Penix or Tua are not necessarily living up to what you want, you could just put the game in the hands of Bijan Robinson for the most part, and hope you can get that running game to an elite level. And if you have a good run game and a good defense, you can definitely win 9 games in the NFL in this era. Like that is a path. Is it a path to winning the Super Bowl these days? Probably going to get boat raced, by the better offenses when you get to the playoffs. But in this NFC South, like this coaching staff is trying to show their competence and show that they can build a winning team without breaking the bank and without trading away assets. And I think that's the best path for them, because if they don't get it done, the worst thing that you did was give out a bunch of 1-year contracts while you're sort of building up and reshaping the team and the image that you want. So I think this is a good strategy. Will it work? We can't answer that question. But
yeah,
it's a different strategy. It is, I think, a pathway for this coaching staff and team to kind of to take from Lord of the Rings, show their quality, and we've been let down by the coaching staff. Not Jeff Ulbrich and the defensive coaches accepted from this last year, but the offensive coaching staff held this team back last year. And maybe you can get more out of what they have. Maybe this is a better team, in terms of results than it is on paper. And that's what they're hoping for. So that's kind of what fans are also going to have to hope for at this point, because clearly they weren't willing to overextend their cap or spend a ton of money early in free agency. They weren't going to get into the mix to totally turn this thing around or dump a bunch of money in to try to prop this up. It does feel like more of an evaluation type of season for this team, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think a little bit more patience might be necessary to get this thing going long-term in the right direction, and not just trying to catch a flash in the pan type season. Like it felt like Fontenot and various coaches were trying to do every year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, for people that are maybe like hearing like, oh, like 8-9 again, 9-8 again, the biggest variable in play here that can shift those numbers up or down is going to be the quarterback play. Whether it's Tua proving that he still has something in the tank, whether it's Mike proving that regardless of the previous coaching staff's failures, as coaches and GM, etc., he's still the right guy. I think this roster is good enough that a legitimate franchise quarterback can do more than enough with what they have on the offensive side of the ball. And, that's not me trying to be unfair, but like if you told me like, hey, we're going to drop maybe not prime Matt Ryan, but like 2012, 2013, if we drop that version of Matt Ryan into this offense, you're telling me that this defense and the offense wouldn't be enough for him? And that's kind of like the mentality I think that as a fan, you should go into this with, not trying to make too many excuses for the quarterback. Because Matt Ryan had coaches that got fired too, right? And he had obviously down years too. It's not necessarily all on the quarterback play. There are other things that could swing those wins and losses, but I do believe that this season, that the QB play is going to be the variable that has the biggest effect on that. And that's typically how it goes every year. But this one kind of feels like, I don't want to feel like we're just, trying to finish in the middle. I do think that they're building the roster in terms of like, yeah, we're not going to sink and make these crazy all-in moves, do these big trades and things like that. But there is an infrastructure here for a competent franchise quarterback to be able to come in and be able to get the most out of this team. And I think Tua choosing to sign here is kind of one of the biggest signals of that, because there were other options for him out there, and he was aggressive in getting it done here because Kyler Murray went and swooped up the other opportunity in Minnesota. And so, I do think that this is a space, this is a roster that, I believe has enough for a quarterback of that kind of caliber to be able to come in and get the job done. And, we might see somebody come in and play great and they still somehow, don't accumulate the win total that we want. But, as long as, the quarterback position isn't holding things back this year, I think that will give us a lot more clarity moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, again, it sums up why I think Tua is like a really good quarterback ad. And, maybe at some point we can do more of a deep dive on why that addition is probably a bigger deal than a lot of people think. I feel like a lot of people just treat it like a joke, oh, Tua, oh, he sucks. Tua's inconsistent as hell, but Tua has had some legitimately great stretches of his career. And if you get Tua hot, he can definitely take you to the playoffs. But, I don't think this team wanted to invest in that possibility, and they probably won't, even if he delivers it this year. But, this is a situation, and I think we're both on the same page here, where this team needs a floor at quarterback that's going to allow them to evaluate this offense, and they needed a good, hard look at Michael Penix. And if they need to know if he's good enough. And if he can't beat out Tua, they have their answer, right? And if he can beat Tua, but he's just mediocre, they also have an answer. If he beats out Tua and looks great, they have another answer, and they can keep building that direction. And that's probably the best case scenario, that Penix is showing you that he is better than Tua, which I would say Tua's, average NFL. Like, if you look at his career in totality, probably an average NFL starter. If you look at the last year, you probably think he's garbage. So, there's more than one season to look at there, but he is an interesting quarterback. I think Penix is also interesting. And then you got Trevor Siemian in case they both get hurt, which a lot of people are like, oh, that's going to happen. So, Trevor Siemian's played before, but, if Trevor Siemian's starting at any point, then we could probably just start looking at quarterbacks. And, I feel like we talk about this every cycle, but, historic, quote unquote, quarterback draft coming up apparently. So, yeah. I mean, there's definitely going to be a lot of quarterbacks in it. I don't know what we'll think about them by the time we get there, but there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks. So, it'll be interesting, but I think this is a good year to try to make a decision on your quarterback future, preparing for what could be a very good 2027 NFL draft.
Yeah. Very reminiscent of Ian Cunningham's time with the Bears, where they legitimately kicked the tires on Fields. He wasn't their guy, but you know what? They gave him a shot in that year before the quote unquote next great quarterback class, which was the Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, and they set themselves up that year to be able to jump all in behind their new investment. I expect that Ian kind of learned a lot from that. And, he's obviously here, not doing anything where he's completely dismissing the investment that's already been made by drafting Penix. He's going to do, everything they can, I think, to get the most out of him, to get as good of a look out of him as they can. But, there's also no reason for this staff to marry themselves to any quarterback option that's on the team right now. And so I think you're going to get a clear, unbiased evaluation from this group. And I think that that's something that fans should actually relish, because it can be detrimental to, the sunk cost fallacy of believing that you, no matter what, are going to bury yourself with this guy because of the investment that you made as a staff, getting a fresh set of eyes, getting new people in the building to kind of get a look at this situation, and then giving the kids a chance to compete, go out there and figure out who's going to be the guy at the end of the day. That's what you should want for your football team every summer. Like, this is what football is supposed to be about, is about competition. I think that the team has set themselves up well to create a healthy environment to get the best out of their quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think so too. So I think we're both pretty excited, couched necessarily, but excited about the investments. And like, again, this doesn't change or affect their 2027 at all. Like, and we've talked about it, I think before last time we talked, we were like, oh, are they going to try to get comp picks? They have 3. And we're not talking about historic, crazy comp picks, but they have a fifth for Caden Ellis. They have a sixth, I believe the one they're keeping is for Tyler Algier, and then they have a seventh for Arnold Ebiketie. So they do have three comp picks. They can start to sort of get this ball rolling. I think that clearly was a point of emphasis for them with all these 1-year deals, with all these low dollar value signings. I think this is a different approach on so many levels, and I'm interested to see how this all plays out. And I think we could see a very different approach next year. Like next year, teams don't get multiple years to sit and wait, but I think the measured, and what I keep thinking when I look at how these guys have operated, it just feels very mature. And maybe that's Matt Ryan, maybe that's Ian Cunningham, maybe that's Kevin Stefanski. These are all guys that have done this. Ian Cunningham's a first-time GM, but like Matt Ryan's been on a lot of teams and been through rebuilds and knows what it's like. Kevin Stefanski's been on the Browns, which, like, if that doesn't harden your mind and soul, then nothing in this world will. So he knows, like, what you need to, he knows what terrible looks like. He knows what you need to do to compete, and I think they're trying to achieve a level this year, which is, we feel like if things go right, we can compete for this division because it's for grabs. But if things go wrong, we're setting ourselves up for 2027 with an open book. We can write anything we want on these pages. We can completely reshape this roster. We can let all these free agents walk and recoup more comp picks. Probably nothing crazy, but maybe some, continue to let those have, and we could still sign guys. We could bring in new guys. But when you play this 1-year deal game, it cuts both ways. It's like, oh, well, you're going to have a lot of guys potentially competing, for better contracts elsewhere, but you're also having a lot more opportunities for guys to hit and then deliver comp picks to you in the future. And I know some fans are like, oh, these picks, they're late. Who cares? Like, this is part of playing the game. Comp picks are basically free. Like, you just get extra draft value added when other people sign your good players. And you can't sign all these good players. If you could, you would have done it. So you're just getting bonus value. And in the NFL, where you're looking for every single inch of competitive advantage, I just don't understand teams that don't play the comp pick game. Like, you could tell under Terry Fonte, they didn't give a shit. Like, they didn't even try. And I just don't know how you can just piss away free value. Maybe it's not, first round pick value, but any value, any surplus you can add, you get 3 extra day 3 picks. You could trade those mid-season for guys that you need. You could package those and get another, 4th rounder. I mean, you could do all kinds of stuff with those picks, or you could just take them and try to build out cheap depth on your roster that you haven't had since, I don't know, way too long. So, I like the maturity. I like the measured approach. Will we like it as much during the season if this team is like exceedingly mediocre or bad? Probably not, but at least there will be a vision. And the vision is, like, we're not going to overspend on a 2026 season that we feel like our chances of winning the Super Bowl are pretty close to 0. So we're going to use this in a meaningful way to evaluate what we have on our roster, try to win the division. Let's see if we can make something happen. But if it doesn't work out, we're set up in 2027 to potentially draft high, and we have complete flexibility with our salary cap to go in any direction we want, at quarterback, edge rusher, wide receiver, anything. They could do it all. So to me, I'm a fan. So my review of the free agency, I know some people have said, oh, this terrible free agency, they didn't do anything. It depends on what you're grading it on. Are you grading it on their, like, were they trying to push for a Super Bowl? Then you would give it an F, because they're clearly not trying to do that. But if you're looking at how this team is being built and trying to build for the future, which I think it's obvious they were going to go this route. They had a complete regime change. I would give it like a B. I think these are reasonable signings. And if they hit on a few of these guys, I mean, I think you're looking at this as being a good situation where now you're getting surplus value and you have complete flexibility going forward. So I feel good about it. How do you kind of feel on the whole after the first wave here, Tre'Shon?
C plus, C plus, B minus area. I think that it's been fine. There's a couple of I like we've talked about the Tua situation. Like, would I have preferred Kyler Murray, or would I have preferred maybe even Geno Smith or some other kind of options out there? Sure, but like at the end of the day, the value, it's not that, that you can't argue with the value of that contract. And like, maybe there's a couple, like I really liked like the possibility of adding Jalen Naylor to this. His market was a little bit more strong than I thought. And then it's like, okay, do you really want to invest that much into him? Sure, you can make the argument for it. But at the end of the day, like Ian did what he had to take care of. And that was raising the floor of the wide receiver room. That was making sure that there was depth in those trenches, replacing Onyemata, replacing Street, retaining LaCale London. There are a lot of savvy signings here, and we're not overextended anywhere. Like you've mentioned, like nothing that we've done so far is going to bleed into 2027, and that was just something that we have not. But Terry always made sure that we were going to lose something in the future. Every single off season, he made sure that there's something we're not going to have. I'm not sure how the conditions work out, but I still think Terry may have robbed us from a 2027 pick with the Jarrell trade. We'll have to see, if his playtime conditions or whatever those thresholds were met. But like that's kind of like the self-undermining stuff that really just was getting under my skin to the point to where it's like you can't just keep doing that with your picks. Ian has come here. It's a new philosophy. And it's one that, we don't have a lot of experience on this end. We've seen it, we've seen it from afar from the Ravens and these other organizations that seem to have consistent success. So going to stand pat, going to trust, what we're seeing so far, but that grade is set to improve because this is just the first wave of free agency. You've already mentioned it, but there's always summer signings, right? Justin Simmons, I think got signed 2 weeks before training camp. When they brought him in that year. We've seen these late signings that have impacts on the team. And so, we're not done yet. We've got a long way to go, and it'll be interesting to kind of see, now that he's been very needs focused, what are the sprinkles that he's going to throw on top of this, and where is he going to go in the draft? And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to really improve kind of the foundation he's laid down in this upcoming draft.
Yeah, I think so. So it's going to be a really exciting draft cycle. I'm looking forward to it. We're just getting started with that coverage here. I'm sure that'll be sort of the primary topic over the next month, guys, because we're zeroing in on just 30 days till the draft, so or close to it. So it's going to be a really exciting month here. We're going to be rolling into some mock drafts. We're going to be heading in that direction now that the dust has sort of settled on free agency, but. Yeah, before we get any further, just want to thank you guys for hanging out with us here on Tuesday Takes on the 30 Birds of Bruce podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm Kevin Knight. He's Tre'Shon Diaz at Trey3Sean. You can check out his show, All Trey Phases, on the YouTubes. You can check out everything else, Tre'Shon.io as well. And, of course, you can also like and subscribe to this show. That would be really cool. And you could leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. If you want to support us even more, go to Patreon, patreon.com/FalcoHawkLive, or join up with the channel memberships here on YouTube. But yeah, guys, we'll be back. Adnan is also returning this week, so we have all the great returns stacked up. Adnan will be back Wednesday night, so we'll be getting his take on the last month's activity. Before we head into another mock draft for you guys, post-free agency mock draft coming Friday, and then we'll be full steam ahead into the NFL draft after that. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for joining Tre'Shon and I here on Tuesday Takes. We will see you again real soon. Have a great day, folks.